That all needed equal attention to make this work. So there's people, planet, and profit. All three of them need to work simultaneously in our current economic system for ultimately there to be a long-term success of our species and of the planet. And so here's how I think that's going to work, actually. So the first thing is, how do I simplify my life? So I've spent a lot of time sort of getting rid of the consumption. So the first thing I did is I looked at my utility bills. I looked at ComEd, looked at the Pacific Energy, looked at water bills to figure out how much energy are we actually consuming and how do I lower that. Then I did things like getting an audit, an energy audit of our property to make sure that everything, that we were being as efficient as we could be with our energy that we were using. Then, of course, I did other things. I started joining car sharing networks and we actually sold a car. Check out more books now from the library. You notice some of those books that I showed you in the beginning were books from the library. I now take the bus. I do things like that. I buy stuff on Craigslist when I buy stuff first to make sure that there's no consumption and I'm not buying new products. But there's more to this story. As I think about what we need to do, right now we're a very centralized economy, globe, species, planet. And this is the first thing that we need to figure out how to get off as a society. It's not actually a piece of coal, but it could be. This has more carbon and is more destructive than any other energy source out there. So not only do we need to reduce the amount of energy we need to get rid of this. So let me take care of that first. The next, and similar to that, is thinking about how we move from a centralized system, centralized economy, where you have energy companies and banks and these large institutions that are in here, so that if one of them fails, you see all these single dots out here only have one connection to them. They all become very vulnerable. And this is a just-in-time environment that we've built with our streamlined distribution systems. The next is decentralized. So you get here where there's less of an impact if one of these big ones go, but you still have quite a big impact if some of those go. Where we ultimately I believe we need to get to is a distributed model in anything from food, energy, manufacturing, a lot of those types of things. So energy, we need to make sure we're not getting all of our energy from a single source or from a single supplier. We need to make sure that we're not getting all of our food from a single system that can have all kinds of failures, as what we've seen. Most recently, here's straight off the FDA's website. You probably can't see it, but urgent nationwide egg recall. So as many of you might remember, 300-something million eggs were recently recalled because of E. coli bacteria. More and more our system is becoming vulnerable. So how do we plan and how do we do that? The first thing is zone zero, is what they call it in permaculture. And that's sort of looking at ourselves and our family and our houses. So thinking about our yards, where we live, how we get around, sort of what the transportation is and everything around zone zero. That's my Dutch bike. That's one of the things that we use for a lot of transportation. And so there's a lot that has to happen in zone zero. So thinking of the house. So what did we do? What have I been doing in the house? Not only looking at energy bills, but looking at things like LED light bulbs. So 90% more efficient than incandescent light bulbs. They cost a little more, but they dramatically lower the energy production in our house. And I'm not a big fan of buying our way out of this, but certainly there are things that make sense. There's some other things that we've done out there, using solar power. So this is a solar-powered flashlight, so we're now working on how do we get more solar power on our house so that we can actually get our house down to zero net energy, so it produces as much energy as it consumes. Some other things that we are working on, so caulking, so weatherization, so making sure that we actually can take care of, sealing all the leaks and the gaps in the house to make sure that it is as energy efficient as it can be. And this is one of my favorite books. Another thing that I've done is a book called The Urban Homestead. I've actually spent a lot of time reading this and understanding how do we do things like canning food and vegetables and that kind of stuff to make ourselves as energy efficient, as environmentally friendly, and as resourceful and distributed as possible. We're going to have to embrace all sorts of things. So here we think about small transportation. Yes, this is actually good. But this is more or less bad. And here's another example. So here's Green Mountain Coffee. Also very good, or also less bad than sort of, better than conventional, but certainly not as good as where we need to be. We actually need to get to being regenerative, which is, if you look at this is a plate of compost, actually from our garden out there, and some worms and stuff have actually been through this. So now we're actually building fertility back into the soil and being regenerative with our livelihood. So other things that we're doing along with that, doing a lot of our own gardening to make sure that we can have fresh produce whenever, and that we take strain off the number of food miles that actually travel for the food that we eat. Some of the things that we do is we shop more locally now and buy more local goods. This is honey that was actually harvested off of a rooftop not too far from here. And we do things like, buying local tomatoes when we buy them, and only buying stuff that's in season. Getting locally grown fresh eggs and stuff that are delicious and really tasteful. And then finally doing some other things like getting very durable. So looking at how do we use and get things that will last for a super long time. So then we move out to zone 1, which zone 1 is our block. So how do we make sure that our block has everything that it needs and actually becomes a more self-sustaining and vigorous community, so that if there are things like food shocks or other things like that, we can actually reduce our energy consumption through time and actually have a more resilient, more locally based economy. And then it sort of moves out to zone 2, so the larger area to neighborhoods, and to making sure that that is as resilient as can be. So as I sort of wind down here, there's a number of things that we can do. And the first thing is sharing, proliferating, learning, get to know your neighbors, learn who they are, and then gather some skills. So I'm learning a lot about growing food, harvesting rainwater, permaculture, working on a zero net energy home. How do we eliminate our waste, build community, or eliminate the concept of waste, build community, getting involved, planting trees, tell a friend, harvest rainwater. Got that twice, actually. And then meeting our neighbors and that kind of stuff. So finally, hopefully, how I'm thinking about this and why I'm motivated is I look to the future, and I look to their future, my 2 daughters. And I'm very excited what's out there, but it's going to be a different future than what we're used to and what we've grown up with. So what I'm doing is trying to figure out how I can make this place a better planet for them and their future.